You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may not be bike races, but we love it. In the land of the rising sun, a new star was trying to assert themselves before being cruelly reminded that not all fairy tales come true. Damp conditions made the track difficult all weekend as Pecco Bagnaia kept it cool to capitalise on his rivals' faltering. I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in a virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. Returning from being AWOL in the wild, it's co-host Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hi, Kyle. Find my way back to the microphone and happy to be back after missing the last race. And so good to be here for the critically not acclaimed, boring race of the season.
Well, you say it's boring. I thought it was quite exciting, but welcome back. Great to have you back. We're also joined by the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
I love it when you can see the aerodynamics.
Oh, don't we all? A heart back to 90s F1 vortices there. That was good. And we're also joined by the returning smooth talking Texan, Adam Rosales. How's it going, Adam?
Hey guys, good to be back. It looks like somebody new crashed this weekend out of the lead.
Yeah, indeed. Could be a trendsetter. That's right. So going into the weekend then, Jorge Martin comes in with a 21-point lead over Bagnaia, and I think as we ascertained in the previous episode, we've got Bastianini and Marc Marquez 75 and 78 points further back and pretty much out of the title fight now. So quite interesting practice and qualifying. All weekend it was quite gloomy and very sort of grey, damp. The track looked really, really tricky, but it was nice to see the KTMs being pretty quick and also the GP23s being pretty fast and all through to Q2. There were a few notable things in the practice. Was Marquez, albeit looking pretty quick, was not particularly happy with the handling of his Ducati and was looking a bit frustrated going into qualifying. And guys, we had quite a dramatic qualifying session there. I thought this was one of the most exciting sessions of the weekend, to be honest, was quali, because it was damp going in, Jules, and I loved how much the bikes were moving around during the session.
Yeah, you could really see a lot of the riders looking for where the grip was, not because it's not a grippy track, on the contrary, but for the whole of the weekend, there would have been damp conditions. There would have been a bit of rain, a bit of spitting, and then not, and then trying to find the best lines, of course. And it was during quali where some of the big guns pushed it a little bit too hard and then crashed. We had 3 minutes ago on the Q2 session. Which is about the worst time to bin it in the gravel, and that was exactly what Jorge Martin did. The championship leader lost it, and we're used to say like, oh yeah, he was fighting for pole or he lost pole position, but we get to the pole sitter later. But what I wanted to accentuate here is that Jorge, for all of this weekend, didn't really seem on it. And so far, during practice, during the quali, he wasn't like we're used to. He's immediately setting the fastest times, and he looked a bit struggling with these conditions, opposed to Pecco Bagnaia, who probably got out of bed on Friday and thought, all right, I'm going to nail this. This is mine.
Well, what I really love about this is, and we're talking about people falling off their bikes, but we should probably talk about track limits too a little bit if we're going to talk about who eventually got pole. But to my mind, everyone came out of that qualifying talking about the wrong Marquez. I mean, yeah, Mark is fast, whatever, but his brother might ultimately be the reason this championship goes the other way, because Martin was on a fast lap and ran square into the back of Alfredo. I'm joking, of course. And that took away. He pitted after that and never set another fast lap. If he'd had that lap credited, he wouldn't have been starting from 11th place. I am convinced of that. And I feel like that's maybe a little overlooked moment of the weekend for sure.
Ooh, that's interesting. So you're saying he got blocked or stumbled upon an Alex Marquez. For those listening, Matt likes to give Alex, we called him Alfred, Albert so far. So yeah, we'll have a different name for him every round. So basically Alex Marquez, unintentionally blocked, I think, Martin. But that's a really good point, because then that put him under pressure. And as Jules said, about 4 minutes left, he then throws it down the road, trying to push really, really hard. That was super, super interesting. And yeah, you're right, Matt. Like if he would have got that lap in, he probably would have been about 4th or 5th, you reckon?
Yeah, he would have been second row for sure. And I think that would have definitely changed it. But it also brings up, since we're talking about him right now and things that might have happened, it brings up an interesting dynamic that relates to him not being comfortable on the bike, which is his front tire and the braking in particular on the front seem to really be giving him a hard time this weekend, and particularly when the tire is cold. And this isn't the first time or first race where we've seen him early days have an issue like that, particularly on really steep turns. So something about that combination is a little bit, I think, of a weakness for him on this bike right now. And the combination of having to come in, come in and try and get those tires back up to temperature after he came out with 4 minutes left and maybe one shot at best, just put him right into that zone where it caught him out.
And maybe that was even accentuated by the temperatures over at Motegi this weekend, because it was constantly around 20 degrees Celsius, which is coming from the countries where we've been recently, like Italy and Indonesia. This was pretty how do you say this, crispy weather?
Crispy is a good word, but it's also just kind of a weird track where it's initially an oval, but because it's in Japan, it's kind of run, traditional backwards direction compared to what NASCAR runs. But the inside, or the first sector, is essentially flat. There's hardly any camber, positive or negative, or any elevation. It's just kind of weird. And the kind of second and third sectors is where you see more elevation. It's got some flat apexes and then that like brutal downhill at the end of the straight braking that just, causes a ton of events over the weekend. But the last couple of corners are the only ones that really have any kind of significant angle. But that just leads to some weird setups that they got to accommodate some of this stuff for.
Yeah, absolutely. And also a key feature of this track is there's a few corners that tend to tighten quite sharply on the exit. Again, it's a little bit like Mazzano. It's almost like they're running the wrong way round some of the corners. And Turn 4 is a little bit like that. And somebody who was caught out by this very marginally and a bit controversially was Marc Marquez, after setting what looked to be an unbelievable lap time and a new lap record. Absolutely stunning lap time, had just clipped the green. It was so marginal in the exit of Turn 4, I believe. But the weird thing about this was the system glitched. Usually it's automatic and they instantly tell them that the lap time's been deleted. It didn't. It glitched. And then that meant that they didn't realise and they didn't have time to go again. So they're a little bit aggrieved. I don't think they're going to argue about clipping the green. I mean, as annoying as it is, there was zero advantage gained, but the rules are the rules. Other people have fallen foul of this. That's fair enough. But not telling them, I think we're a bit annoyed because, Matt, particularly early in the session, I think it was on the first flying lap, and I just want to say this, Marquez going into Turn 2, the rear wheel was about half a metre in the air. He tipped it in and I'm just waiting to hear the whoom, like noise of him going down, and he didn't. He made it to the apex and then stuck it on the pole. I was like, how on earth have you got that stopped?
I have no idea. And I would argue with you that time was unbelievable till we saw it on the board. But you're correct. The rules are the rules. He gained no advantage. But to me, this needs to be an amendment. If there's an infraction like that, and there's no advantage gained, and the competitor isn't correctly notified in a timely manner, then the lap time should stand. I think all the competitors and teams would agree that's a fair way to do it, even though that does mean arguing about whether or not an advantage was actually gained. But it's unfair.
I kind of want to touch on the subject a little bit about the qualifying rules. I feel like there's a few things that could kind of, I know it's under consideration to get updated or changed for next season. There's some things like the minimum, or I guess maximum sector times on an out lap and things like that to try to curb or eliminate people from following or waiting for a tow. Some of that's in discussion, but there's some of the things like the track limits or the yellow flags. I feel like there's just so much that happens in the last 3 to 4 minutes of qualifying every race that we're just kind of left disappointed at what could have been. And I just feel like I feel like something is not necessarily wrong, but it could be better. And I just don't exactly know what that is.
Yeah, it's hard to not agree with, really, because I think it was funny, the confusion in the session when all of a sudden you just see Acosta go to the top and then Mark plummet down to 9th. Everyone's like, what's happened there? Because I think all the comment teams were just like gushing over the lap and like that was absolutely incredible. And then all of a sudden it's taken away, and then it only comes to like what it is. And then when you see the amount of green that was taken, and it was just minuscule, like rules are the rules. Like you can't argue with that. I don't think anyone was arguing about that. But I don't know. Like Adam, I'm not a big fan of the following, but it's kind of like a part of it. We sort of see it in other classes as well. But I wish they got rid of this green rules and maybe did it a bit like Formula One. They only penalised the track limits on corners where you actually get an advantage for going wide. For these green rules, when they put it on the corners there, like you can see that was 0 advantage gain. But it's the same for everyone. The rules are the rules. But I'd like to see the riders really pushing the track limits a bit more and get right up to the edge, flicking a bit of dirt up. And I think this, you can't touch the green, drop off the back of the curb, really takes a bit of that away, and it takes the risk taking away a little bit.
Yeah, I do like the green rule because I feel like it's been pretty consistent, except when it glitches. But the other part is like there's always the inevitable Spargaro crash, and it just kills half the grid trying to set a pole lap, or you get Alex Marquez blocking Jorge Martin, who's trying to fight for the championship, and it's just like we don't get to see the full potential because somebody always bends it, and it's just kind of discouraging from watching qualifying sometimes.
Yeah, it can get annoying. Stopping people from binning it, I'm not sure what you can do about that, given super grippy tyres and super grippy track. But all of that, anyway, all kind of transpired that it meant that Pedro Acosta, amazing performance. He'd been looking quick all weekend and he had good race pace as well. But Pedro Acosta sensationally gets his pole position with a 43.0. Marquez's 42.8 was obviously disallowed and he ended up in 9th. And as we'd said, Jorge Martin was down in 11th after that crash. So it was Acosta on pole, Bagnaia in 2nd, and Maverick Vinales in 3rd. And that's probably about the only time we're going to speak with him about this podcast, because he did his usual disappearing act during the races, which is a shame to see. But it's good to see an Aprilia back up there as well, Trumpets.
Well, yeah. And if we're going to talk about manufacturers being back up there, I think you already mentioned it, but the particular vagaries of this track really seem to bring KTM and Aprilia sort of back into the picture. And I think that's going to be interesting fodder for future discussion once we see the results.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about results, let's go and look at the sprint race. Okay, so on to the sprint race then. And I think the main thing that sort of jumps out here immediately off the start was Jorge Martin. What a start. P11 up into P5. And you're like, wow, here we go. He's really going to start sticking it to the people ahead. But his pace, if we just focus on Martin to start on the sprint discussion, his pace seemed to stagnate. And what Jules was saying earlier on in the show about he wasn't really looking that comfortable was playing true here in the sprint. He had a brilliant start, got up to like I think it was like P5, and then Marquez passed him. And then Martin just didn't seem to have much of an answer. He didn't seem to have a lot of pace, and he ends up coming home P4, which again is not bad from P11, but it was a bit worrying signs for the main Grand Prix on Sunday. I was a bit like, oh, like, he really is struggling. So somebody who wasn't struggling though was Pedro Acosta. Like, wow, sat there behind Pecco. Like Pecco got the whole shot pretty much, and then Acosta passed him. If you were watching on TNT Sports, the commentary was perfect because they were just explaining how he's aggressive and he'll go for a chance exactly as he gets a bit of slipstream and absolutely sends it. He was looking so comfortable. Then and heartache. It looked like he had about a second lead as well, and he throws it down the road.
He was looking very up for it. He obviously lost the position at the start of the race, and he wouldn't have any of it. It seemed like he didn't have any respect in a healthy way for Pecco Bagnaia, the double world champion, taking off, who actually had a great start for a change, and he was just on it immediately. And I think it was around 2 laps it took him to overtake Bagnaia and take the lead, and not like, okay, I'm going to try this and maybe I can hang on to it until I'm exiting this corner, and he's going to do a rebound immediately. He kind of rode away, and he had a decent gap, not too big. And the lap before he crashed, there was 4 to go, and the lap before that, it was like you could almost see this coming. In one lap, he won about 7/10 on Bagnaia, and it was like, wow, he's has he got something left, or what's happening here? And it was like he wanted to secure his win already, but it wasn't like he had a lot left. He was obviously pushing the bike too hard, and he would later on say and own up to it and just say, like, I made a mistake. But it seemed so unnecessary, because it wasn't like Bagnaia was on his rear tire looking for a way to get past. He looked pretty secure at the moment. And even then, why would you push it that hard with 4 laps to go? Why don't you save it for another 2 laps? I mean, it's not like you needed to push it already.
Right. I don't want to steal this from Adam, but as someone who has competed on 2-wheel vehicles, when you get into that rhythm, when you feel like, oh, it can be faster and faster and faster and faster, you are very careful about disturbing it, because once you're out of it, you may not find it again. And especially, I think, the sprint race thing, it was just like, am I remembering correctly? It was just like a tiny extra bit of curb and a little bit wide and a slightly tighter angle, and then just bang. I mean, I know at this level, we're allowed to say those are mistakes, but yeah, man, that it's pretty brutal to judge someone harshly for that kind of a mistake, I think.
Yeah, it was pushing really hard. He was it was when he's sort of transferring on the flip-flops. So he was coming over, pulling the bike to the right-hand side, braking hard into a really fast left-hander, and just tucked the front. And it was amazing to see him sliding, probably still doing about 80 mile an hour on his derriere, with his hands over his face, knowing what he's just done. He just can't believe it. So clearly no injuries there. Just the biggest injury is his pride. Stunning ride so far, and I still think he deserves praise for the race he was putting in. We'll get on and talk about him a little bit later, but Jules made a good point that it was kind of quite unnecessary, because as we saw later in the race, after Marquez and Bastianini start having an epic battle, they suddenly close on Bagnaia, who seems to start going very, very slowly. Something weird going on with his bike. So that even makes it even more unnecessary for Acosta, knowing that in hindsight that Bagnaia was suddenly lost a load of pace at the end of the race. Acosta could have just properly backed it off and just cruised home for his first win. But Matt, what was going on at the end of the race with Pecco Bagnaia?
Well, this is one of these things, and I will admit I stole this anecdote from my favorite MotoGP rider. But in the old days in Formula One, they used to say the perfect engine is the one that explodes right after you hit the finish line. Well, nowadays, the perfect bike is the one that runs out of fuel the moment after you hit the finish line. And it seems like Ducati has found an extra decimal point when it comes to Bagnaia's bike in the amount of fuel in it. But the other thing that happened, and I believe this was on the sprint race, was that because it was damp, he ran a full power map on his sighting lap. And apparently that upset the fuel calculation apple cart to the point where he had to run in what I think they called his B map for the sprint race. And it just, I think it left him vulnerable late in the race because the nature of the track is lots of low gear acceleration, which is very fuel dependent.
Wow. So you're saying that he's taken a risk to run at full power, like the fuel is massively marginal anyway. So even running full power on your sighting lap to get a handle on the grip conditions, he's made a calculated decision to burn more fuel to do that, to get more of a feel. But it was so tight on fuel that that's made him had to run a suboptimal, using a McLaren term, map to then. But I don't think people realize like how close he was to actually losing the race at the end of the thing. Like his pace just absolutely plummeted. So I think the bikes are quite smart. They know if they're going to run out of fuel, the bikes will automatically start to tone the power down as well. Maybe because it was dramatic. The last lap or so was really dramatic. He was having to fuel save. So wow, he could actually, well, in hindsight, he went on to win the race. So to say that was a smart move. But I'd kind of maybe argue another way, like that was a bit of a risk to take there, was it not? To knowingly use more fuel to try to get more grip. Because did his teammate, Adam, I don't think Bastianini did the same thing. He didn't seem to have fuel problems.
No, I don't think Bastianini did. This track is just kind of weird. Over the years, there's always been some kind of fuel issues with various riders. I remember Cal Crutchlow running out of fuel back in the day. It just seems like there's always something that's kind of just different about this circuit. And it could be like Matt said about the low gear accelerations out of the corners. There's several of them, and they're heavy on the throttle for, an extended amount of time compared to some of the other circuits, especially the ones that we've seen in the last few races.
And this is where the fun things can come into play, like because it's a different power map, you're maybe a gear lower coming out of a turn than you normally would be and using more fuel. It's not necessarily a direct thing. These factors all play together. But the thing is, he had the time in hand. And I think as he himself might have acknowledged, well, yeah, that, but also no one was going to catch me. So I was going to slow myself. I wasn't going to take any unnecessary chances at that point.
And to add to that, in the very last lap, he afterwards said, I slowed down a bit on purpose because it started to rain a bit and I didn't want to take any chances. But I think he must have mistaken the fight that Bestia and Marc Marquez were having, because they were taking it right down the wire. I crawled up to him with a crazy pace that you were like, oh no, is this going to be a three-way fight in the last couple of corners? And then afterwards he said, I slowed down on purpose because it started raining. And I thought, he said, I could slow down for 1 second. And I thought that was illustrative for the way these guys are able to calculate their pace. If you can say in a race trim, I'm gonna slow down by 1 second because I know I have 1.3. It actually happens. I think that's. I mean, we praise these guys for being heroes, not too often because you can't say that too much. But these kind of things, I think, are nice to know because it says so much about their ability.
Wow, yeah, you're sitting there thinking they might catch Bagnaia because of the ferocity of their battle, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is just going to promote Martin to hold positions right at the end of the race, and he's not going to have to do anything but finish.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, because what a battle that was between Bastianini and Marquez. There's no love lost between them two at all, and that was hard racing, but really fair. It was really, really good. Adam, I love seeing two guys absolutely go at it, but that wasn't crossing the line. That was tough. Marquez slipped up the inside and Bastianini immediately shoved the really hard move back on him, with Marc totally leaning on him and placing complete trust on him.
Do you remember Motegi 2010 when it was Jorge Lorenzo and Valentino Rossi? I was getting a little bit of reminding feelings about that. That was such a brutal battle that kind of got overshadowed by, the Barcelona kind of back and forth between Lorenzo and Rossi. That's what I was getting flashbacks to. It was great to see.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And they're both really late on the brakes. And it always makes me sort of wince on the front end, that big old, this one, I think it's turn 15 or 16, the one right near the end of the lap, the really steep downhill, the one where Bastianini went right up the inside again. That's like front tire end torture, off camber, downhill, braking hard. And they were both kind of over the braking limit, leaning on each other. And I love the fact that Mark intentionally knew he was there, and he was like, I'm still just going to lean on him, trying to just like the mind games, leaning on him, and Bastian is just having none of it. And it was really, really good race. It was nice to see them afterwards fist bump. They both knew that was a really good race, but that was hard and right up to the edge. But we want to see more stuff like that. So amazing. I think Bagnaia can't really believe his luck and counting his chickens, because Acosta has given him that race win. But fair play for Bagnaia for judging it, as Jules said, so quite perfectly. I'm sure if he watched it back on TV, he'd think, that was a bit too close for comfort, really. Didn't really want to say. Bagnaia were getting the win, Bastianini in second, Marquez in third, and Jorge Martin, a bit of a flaccid fourth, really, for him. It was, his pace had kind of dropped off a little bit. But, Jules?
Yeah, can I add a little bit to that? Because we shouldn't forget that Martin had track limits warning like really early on in the race.
Oh yeah,
already.
it was like lap 2, wasn't it, or something stupid early? Yeah.
And like really early, and that must have hampered his run in, his hunt for more points in some way, because you're not going to risk a long lap at any track, but also not at MotoGP, especially if you're trying to damage or limit your damage. So that was maybe one point for Jorge to make in his defense.
So you're going to regret going on at length like that, Kyle. But first, I want to say that when you're talking about Martin, it's also important to remember how little actual practice time they get to make setup changes and stuff like that. And he was still, I think, fairly uncomfortable. A lot of times a sprint race is essentially like another test session for them to really have the race setup dialed in and make the rider happy. But it occurs to me as you're sitting there talking about the Acosta crash, if I'm Ducati, I'm probably thinking Acosta is definitely going to make a move. Bagnaia is not going to crash trying to defend it. Follow him to the last lap or two, and then try and make a pass. When he crashed, Bagnaia lost his slipstream. And you know it does take more fuel when you're not in someone's slipstream to go round a track. And so that was just a little additional thought that occurred to me. Sorry for interrupting the flow of the show here.
No, that's all good, because that actually leads me on to something that happens in the Grand Prix, but it's quite poignant to this and fuel issues. Was Brad Binder on the official factory KTM was looking really strong in the sprint race and had a mechanical, but also in the Grand Prix, he ran into fuel difficulties at the end of the Grand Prix, and it's an unusual reason why he did, because he said the rear tire was so knackered, it was spinning up so much on the center of it that he was spinning up, increasing the revs and using more fuel, because he was spinning the rear tire almost down the straight, and he pretty much almost ran out of fuel and really struggled to get it to the line. So very heavy on the fuel. But Bagnaia comes in to win, Bastianini second, Marc Marquez third, Jorge Martin fourth, and the championship lead comes down to 15 points as we head into the Grand Prix. So as Jules has alluded to already, it wasn't the most exciting Grand Prix that we've ever had, but there's a few cool talking points that we'll focus in on. So the first one I really want to talk about is, you have to kind of call it an unexpected double for Pecco, really. Even he himself coming into this weekend said that he expected to struggle, and last year Martin pretty much dominated this weekend. So I think everyone was expecting Martin to be able to eke out his championship lead here. So is this the second weekend on the road that sort of Bagnaia has kind of pulled off a bit of a save here? He's managed it in the 2 weekends where his expected to struggle, Adam, he's actually considerably reduced the championship lead.
I mean, you got to be in it to win it. And he knows how to be consistent. He knows how to be smart with his race pace. I feel like he's a little bit patient, and he doesn't like to take a ton of extreme risks. And I think that this is payoff. I mean, this is how you win a championship. You have to be there to scoop up the points when the guy ahead of you crashes out or makes a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, did he scoop those points. The pace was metronomic. It was incredible. When they put his lap times up, I think I counted 6 or 7 44.8s. And then as the tyres dropped, he drops it down into the 45s. And I think we had some sprinkles of rain towards the end of the race, maybe. So the pace dropped off a little bit more. But wow, like to do those lap times, just metronomic. I mean, we used to see Lorenzo used to be really good at this and doing this a lot, like to the point he used to baffle his own engineers.
That's what it reminded me of. Yeah, Lorenzo.
Yeah. It's absolutely like Lorenzo-esque thing. And just Pecco was absolutely bulletproof. I don't think he even went wide at any point. He was just metronomic. He'd loaded his obviously his champion algorithm, and off he went. So amazing for Pecco. And yeah, I bet he couldn't really believe his luck, really, especially when you're seeing like Martin go down. And I keep saying like believe his luck, where I think that's I'm doing him a bit of a disservice here. He's delivered. He's gone there and delivered the result that I don't think anyone expected him to deliver. While his rival Martin threw it down in qualifying, a good comeback in the sprint. Martin was really good in the Grand Prix as well. Another incredible start to put him into contention to finish just behind him, but. Yeah, the championship lead again has come down to 10 points. So he's coming here with 21 points lead. He's now down to 10. Adam, like Martin, you'd be feeling a little bit sore about that, wouldn't you? You'd have thought if these 2 Grand Prix, I should have a whopping lead by now, and it's actually been halved.
Yeah, it's almost like these guys are just it's almost the most unpredictable MotoGP season we've had, because it's like we thought, Pecco was just going to dominate Misano because it's his home race and all that, but then he didn't. And we thought coming into this weekend, it was going to be Martin's weekend. And then Pecco ended up winning and pulling a double. And so this is just a weird season. It's pretty fun to see. But that's where it just circles back to Pecco is just kind of on a pretty consistent level. And he can just ride that metronomic pace and just learn how to keep the points, keep accumulating the points.
I mean, I know you keep me around because I just mostly agree with everyone and don't argue pedantically about stuff. But I got to say that if I'm Martin and I'm coming out of this weekend, I'm actually feeling quite good about myself, because as a competitor, you're looking at, I started 11th both days, and I'm walking out of here with a lead after what happened to me in qualifying. And that includes not just him pinning it in his last fling at glory, but also getting impeded by Marquez without assigning blame to Marquez personally. Just that's what happened. And with all that going against you, to walk out of there with a lead, well, man, he could have been Pedro Acosta sliding down the pavement, and completely different picture coming out of this. So no, I don't find that to be the case.
And also, Bagnaia is riding in some aspects his best season so far. He's secured his 8th victory, Sunday victory of the season, which is a personal record for him, putting him at the same height as I thought Lorenzo Rossi and Stoner. And so he did everything right this weekend, and he actually got this bonus of JM crashing in quali, and still he didn't take back the championship lead. He nibbled away some of the points he was behind, but somehow I feel that it's still Jorge Martin who's well, obviously he is in the lead, but who's also kind of behind the wheel. And in one way, I can understand why Bagnaia was so happy, because he was clearly very happy, as he was clearly very disappointed 1 week ago. But it must also kind of get under his skin that he can't really shake off Jorge Martin the way he probably wanted or expected to after the qualifying results.
So I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but especially in the Grand Prix, at a certain point, everybody was like 2 seconds away from everybody else, and that wasn't really changing very much. And I don't know if you guys watch Formula One at all, but I do. And you see this an awful lot. I think there were some very, based on what I read, I think there's some interesting characteristics to the track and to the amount of aerodynamics on these bikes now that resulted in that. And so that certainly helped Bagnaia out a lot. But the point I really want to make here and I think everyone will agree with me, is next time Acosta finds himself leading a sprint race or a Grand Prix, he's winning that puppy, no doubt about it. And I think Bagnaia also has to acknowledge, yeah, there's a great deal of luck in the fact of having a dead rookie leading, because otherwise he wouldn't have been taking away as many points as he did this weekend.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was just about to come in and say something very similar. Like, it was a bit of a boring Grand Prix, but I think we had a couple of factors that kind of made it a bit of a boring Grand Prix. I think we have a whole topic about Acosta coming up after this, which we'll get on. But if Acosta stayed on, it would have been a bit more exciting. And I also think if Marquez would have started on pole, it maybe would have been a bit more exciting as well. Because if them two could have got away at the front, we would have had to see Bagnaia come through them, and they all would have fought. And I don't think we would have had so much of a field spread either. Like, don't forget, we have had some epic races at Motegi before. It's the 2 consecutive years with Dovizioso versus Marquez springs to mind, and they were both settled on the last lap, last corner type thing. Like, we have had quite a few good races at Motegi, but this has been a weird season because, I'm not a big fan of Misano, and we usually have boring races at Misano, but we had 2 really good and exciting races at Misano, and we go to Motegi, we've had really exciting races in the past and have a boring race. This has been really weird. This season has had more flip-flops than a seaside resort. It has got absolutely loads. The momentums keeps changing, and we've seen that, Matt, with going to different tracks. We expect to have a really exciting Grand Prix and something to happen, and the total opposite happens.
It's become increasingly difficult to predict ahead of time. It's easier to look back and say, oh, that's the reason why this happened. I can understand why it worked out that way. But I'm going to argue with you a little bit because I did rewatch the race last night. I think the first 4 laps of this race, the Grand Prix, were pretty darn exciting. And we had all sorts of wildness, including that crazy crash with the bike stuck on the other bike. It's not like nothing happened. But the inherent strengths of these bikes with the aerodynamics on the front and the nature of having to accelerate in someone's dirty air, which is essentially pretty much the whole track, meant that as the tires wore, it was a fool's errand to really catch anyone and pass them. And I think that, for me, is doing my reading, that's what came across very clearly. There was a very small window of opportunity to make moves, and then it was just about, will anybody fall off?
Yeah, or will anybody succumb to the mental rain, I think they call it, when you get a few spots on your visor and it looks worse than it actually is. So I think we saw at the end of the race, Martin did say this. He was it started looking like it was going to get exciting. Like Bagnaia had like a 1.6 second lead, I think it was, and Martin got it down to like under a second and was closing right in on him. I'm like, right, here we go. And to be honest, I was quite amazed at what I was seeing because, as we've said, Martin did not look comfortable all weekend. And I think that's an incredible save from him. And I was like, wow, if he gets near Bagnaia, surely he'd like to have a bit of a crazy lunge. And, if he accidentally nudges Bagnaia wide, what a shame. He was coming quite quick. And then I think Martin said that, I think he had a bit of reins and had a bit of a moment. And then almost, I'm not going to use a word he used, but say he almost defecated himself when he did that and decided to completely back off, Matt, which I thought was a wise choice. The brown signal was flown. It is interesting to me because we were talking about this already, that the rear tire pushing the front tire. In fact, I put a video, MotoGP put up a video of Jack Miller going around a turn, and you can see what's happening to the bike when you start to get this kind of behavior, when they talk about chatter and stuff like that. And I think for Martin, as that rear tire wore, because we talked about Bender spinning up the tire on the straights, but I think as that rear tire wore and the balance of grip between the front and rear equalized, I think that probably helped him a lot and helped him be able to track down, to close down that gap. But at the end of the day, it was too big and not enough laps, or not enough rain, take your pick, for him to close it. So we're left with the
exactly what you'd expect when Bagnaia leads a race, is Bagnaia wins a race.
Absolutely. And yeah, we've seen him do this so many times. It's very unusual to see him relinquish a lead once he gets out there and done it. So Bagnaia, Mega Pecco, what could he say? Another sort of champion's ride again from him. That's 2 weekends in a row. We expected him to lose ground. He hasn't. He's actually reduced the championship lead. So that was really good. I'd like to move on now and talk about somebody else. And next subject is Acosta, I could have, because wow, what a wasted opportunity again. We've talked about him in the sprint throwing it away. He pretty much had the race wrapped up. But this one, through practice, his race pace was strong as well. And again, he was away in second. He looked to be doing quite well, but I think it was was it lap 2 that he throws it down the road again? And I think it was just a case of him over pushing too hard too early, where really he should have been a bit maybe calmer, chilled out, settled into the race before he started launching his attack on Bagnaia, Jules.
Yeah, it was actually after 4 laps, and so it was a lot earlier than when he binned it on the Saturday. And again, afterwards he owned up to it, and again it was him, in my opinion, not really. And of course, it's easy for me to say from my armchair, but again, it was like not really appreciating the position you're in, and not really being as calculative as you could be, because he said, yeah, I wanted to take a bit more speed out of that final turn to be closer to Pecco on the straight, because he was faster than me in that part of the track. And then I think we're 4 laps in the race. There were 26 of them, and you're in a great position. And exactly like Matt said earlier, you should know, you should have the scenario in your head, like, if I can lose the lead at the start, if I can keep Pecco within reach, who knows, at the end of the race, or changing weather conditions at the end of the race, if I can place an attack, why wouldn't I? He's not going to risk everything. But it was like, and maybe you can hear it, it's almost frustrating, because how cool and how good for the sport also would it be? Because we've lauded Costa, and he's so young, etc. But how good for the sport would it have been if there was a non-Ducati victor, a new Grand Prix winner also? It would have been refreshing, and a testament of him being able to as a rookie.
Yeah, I think he's the only podium non-Ducati since Circuit of the Americas, maybe, when Vinales was on the podium.
Wow, that's right.
It's been a while, and he has been the only non-Ducati joker in this particular deck. His description of what happened fits in with what I was talking about earlier. Just essentially, he was trying to get on throttle earlier. But the thing that happens when you get on throttle is you unweight the front of the bike. And if you've got too much lean angle on it, you're not saving it. And what makes that worse, because you're in the slipstream, the amount of front and side downforce that you're normally expecting is going to be less. And again, with Motegi, the thing that worked in his favor, and I think KTM especially, I've noticed before, that if you look at the kind of aerodynamics they run, super stable, a lot of downforce in a straight line. And that means, relatively speaking, as you're braking. And if you look at how he brakes and runs turns, and this is the frustrating thing, naturally, he rides an incredibly defensive line, because he really does like to get the bike sideways and turned quickly, I think. And I remember watching, it was maybe Circuit of the Americas, someone literally having more speed, but being unable to pass because of where his minimum entry speed was, and the angle he was taking into the apex was just incompatible with being passed. And this is that same kind of track. He just needs to trust himself a little bit more next time. And yeah, it's all there for the taking.
Yeah, absolutely. He is one of the last of the late breakers, and he makes up so much time on the brakes. And we've seen a lot of really good riders do this. We've seen, typically, this is what Marquez is famous for and stuff like that, having to make up the disadvantage on the brakes. I mean, I think categorically, like the KTM is not as good as the Ducatis. I mean, that's pretty obvious, and it's fact it's good the other way, and he's making the difference. So this would have been just not the first sort of non-Ducati sort of win all year. This could have been. He's not even on the official factory bike, Adam. Like this is like the gas, which yes, it's a factory bike, but it's not got the electronic engineers available to him that the other guys do. This would have been amazing for the sport to have a rookie winning on essentially a not a factory bike and on a privateer team.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to touch on is that he's riding it's like a factory supported bike, but he doesn't have anywhere near the amount of engineers that you get at a factory team. And these guys, they know what they're doing, but I think what is working at Pedro's benefit is that he is fairly new to, adjusting to a MotoGP bike or just being able to work on the setup. And I think that a fresh perspective is allowing him to learn new habits and to bring habits from a different bike or a different manufacturer, different team that you get with some of the more experienced riders. And I think that's really what is kind of helping him keep progressing through the season. Because, early in the year, was it Jerez when he started getting, podiums at the sprint. And by this point, I mean, he's fighting for wins on a non-Ducati. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And with that and being new, we said something, I think it was the Portuguese round review where we were just like, yeah, like he doesn't have the bad habits to kind of get over. But on the flip side of that, I think it's actually even more impressive of what he's doing because he's having to figure out his own way of doing it. And I think the factory boys, the rest of the KTM riders, are having to sit up and take notice of like what this kid is doing. They're like, he's changing the way he seems to ride, and he's got a base setting. And yeah, he lost his way a little bit in the middle of the season when they've tried to then engineer to make the bike a little bit better. And they've actually ended up reverting back to their old setting, and instantly Pedro has come back to the fore. Because we said this, Matt, in the middle of the season, he's suddenly remembered that he's a rookie and he's gone backwards. But that's because they're trying to change the setting and progress. So they've gone back to his other setting. They're letting him do his thing and just ride naturally. And wow, the pace comes.
Yeah, if you are a race engineer, please take note of how important rider or driver confidence in their vehicle can be. If I feel confident, then I'm going to extract every last bit of performance. And it doesn't matter if the computer tells me there's another 1/10.5 in it somewhere. If I run these other settings, if my rider's uncomfortable, I'm never going to see that come out in a lap time.
So another thing that really works for Pedro is like, look at the way Pedro and Brad Binder ride those bikes at corner entry. They ride them like Moto2 bikes where they just slide the rear. Jack Miller does it a little bit, but it's not as extravagant. And I think that it's like the way you need to ride that bike, it's a little bit different. And Jack may have a perspective from riding the Ducati where he's just a little bit more smooth on corner entry because he was on Ducati for a few years. And the way it just looks like they're riding a dirt track in a lot of these corners. And it's really exciting to see. And I think next year when Pedro is on the factory KTM, I think he might be at Marquez level where he's going to be winning races.
And if I was Brad Binder, I'd be pretty worried for next season because he's not nailing the factory KTM at all. And then next year having Acosta as a teammate and KTM just bringing in Acosta's kind of, mentor in Moto3 and Moto2, Aki Ajo as their new team manager, whose team this is going to be. And then to think that the KTM Gus brings in Enea Bastianini next season for that team, you could kind of feel where it's going if Brad Binder doesn't nail it next season and who's going to be in his seat from 2026 on.
That's a very good point. So I think basically what we're saying is the KTM bike is basically designed for the headbangers and the hooners. It likes to be ridden hard and sliding in, which I'm not sure Bastianini really has that sort of style, maybe. So it's going to be interesting. But that's a good point, Jules. There's pressure surely mounting onto Binder now, Matt.
Yeah, and the biggest pressure, again, is going to be the fact that somehow Acosta has figured out how to minimize the chatter and the rear pushing the front issues by how he physically rides the bike, where he puts his body weight, and just the minute adjustments he makes that, I mean, I don't know. Can you even really learn that on a conscious level and react at that speed? That's probably a better question for Adam. But I look at that, I'm like, he just has a natural feel for the bike that is, I mean, I don't think we've seen since Marquez.
Yeah, don't think, just twist the throttle. That's basically what he's doing.
Take brain out, stamp on the rear brake and slide it in like a speedway bike. I think it's enough praise of Acosta now, because now I think we've got to the point now. Yes, he's had an amazing rookie campaign. I have done nothing but praise him on here, but I think maybe his rookie grace has maybe worn off a little bit now. And I do think he is open to a bit of criticism. I do think he deserves maybe a tiny bit of criticism for this weekend, because yes, he was amazing. He had awesome pace. He's made two, you have to say, rookie errors and thrown it away by being impatient and maybe getting it. So you could say that he had a chance to maybe get 2 race wins this weekend. He did all the hard work. He had the golden opportunity and he threw 2 opportunities away. Yes, he's a rookie, but I do think now that maybe he's set such a high bar for rookies that maybe now I think a bit of criticism for Acosta is probably valid and worthwhile. We praise him so much. Actually, I'm going to leave it. Let's end on a negative note for Acosta for once, and hopefully he can prove us wrong and go and nab that ring by the end of the season. So how I'd like to finish up this Grand Prix review, it wasn't the most exciting of races, but something we've been wanting to do for the last few episodes, but the races ended up being too darn exciting, was I want to ask my panel and see there. I want to now get a feel on some predictions. We're looking into Phillip Island next, and there's a few rounds left. Like I said, we've had lots of momentum and championship flip-flops. It's been dramatic. So I'm going to go around and ask my panel, who do you think is going to win the championship and why? Adam, I'll start with you. Who and why?
I think Pecco is probably going to come back and win. The way that the next couple of races are going to go, I mean, Phillip Island is going to be fun. It's I have honestly, I know we are trying not to just praise Pedro too much, but I feel like if he's going to win this year, he's going to win at Phillip Island, because that track is a little bit more flowy than, Sepang. But I think Sepang is going to draw in somebody who has the endurance to ride a smart race with the fitness, which is going to be either Martin or Pecco. And then going into the last couple of races, Buriam, I think it's going to be similar to Sepang, where it's hot and it's technical, and it's going to take somebody who can really manage a rear tire. And I think that this is where the cream is kind of going to rise to the top. It's going to be between Martin and Pecco. Valencia is going to be kind of a weird one. That's always kind of a tricky track, but I think it's going to come down to who can maintain the pressure on themselves, because if they can keep the bikes up for the rest of the next few races, I think it's going to be a tight race to the finish in Valencia, and the race is going to come down to the finish line, whoever can, finish ahead of the other, kind of thing, like we've seen a couple of times.
Get off the fence. Who's going to win the championship?
My vote's on Pecco.
Adam goes Pecco. That'd be good. Jules, who's going to win the championship and why?
My feeling is Jorge Martin. And like I said earlier in this episode, Pecco has done everything right this weekend. And even still, I feel like Jorge is not going to let this slip away. And of course, Pecco has an advantage in knowing what it is to fight for a title, knows what it is to defend a title. And I think he was maybe acting a bit tough in the post-race room when he said to Jorge, like, we should be even on points when we go to Valencia and have the fight there. And I don't know, it may be a bit of big talk, but my feeling says Jorge, and the reason is because I think he must be so hungry for it. He must know that next year is very unlikely he'll be in the title fight again, riding in Aprilia. And I just feel he is balanced enough despite his mistakes. He is very conscious of himself, and he actually came out after the race mentioning his nervousness and his anxiety on Saturdays and Sundays. And I thought, oh, that's really honest. And it feels like he's acknowledging his weaknesses. He is not hiding, and he's just going out there. And I think and we said this a couple of times before, a much more sensible rider. And so my feeling, and maybe even a bit of hope, is Jorge Martin.
Nice. Hard to argue with that. Matt, who's going to win and why?
Okay. You're not going to like my answer. But my answer is MotoGP is going to win, because I don't see this being finished before the very last lap of the last race. And I am delighted that that's the case. Now, if we're going to talk about which person is going to win, that is a different question, and I am prepared to answer it, but not until you answer one for me, which is namely into it. How many other 3 times champions do we even have in this sport consecutively?
On the grid or at the moment.
Period.
Yeah, not that many.
In the entire history of the sport, how many people have won 3 championships on the bounce?
Oh, blimey, what it's doing.
Yeah.
Rossi.
Yeah.
Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
All the greats we're going on about.
It's not going to be a lot, is it?
3 on the bounce? No, he didn't do 3 on the bounce.
It's not going to be a lot. A lot of them will have won 3, but 3 in a row is a bit of a special thing. And I'm not going to say I did a lot of math recently about probabilities, but 3 in a row is getting up there, and you've really got to have a lot of luck and a lot of talent. So from that point of view, I think Martin is the clear winner. Secondly, if I look at the riding, the pace of both riders, I just feel like Martin has the tiniest edge right now. And my only other concern is he's not riding for the Ducati factory team. So there's always that, will they try and put their thumb on the scale a little bit? If they don't, I think Martin winds up winning it by a whisker, and we're not going to really know the answer till we get to the end. I'm so delighted for that.
That is a brilliant answer. I love the MotoGP wins as a whole. You could say MotoGP and the fans win as a whole, because this has been in this aero generation, and we've talking about could have boring races. My goodness, have we had an amazing championship. So we've got Adam on Pecco. We've got Matt and Jules both saying Jorge Martin. Now it's my turn. I was going to say Jorge Martin. I think I agree with what Matt says, and I think I agree with what Jules says. I think Martin's a bit more based, a bit more level now, a bit more calm, and he has that raw pace. But I'm going to say Pecco. I think Pecco's going to win on the one reason that Matt's already alluded to. Now, I don't think there is a hope in hell that Ducati are going to allow Jorge Martin to win this championship. I think something will happen. He'll have a funny tyre, the engine will go pop, he'll have a wonky fuel map, or something will go wrong. I just don't think in any way whatsoever that they will allow it to happen. I'm not saying they'll blatantly cheat or do something dodgy. I don't know. If I was like the Ducati boss, I'd be hanging about outside the garages at the back, maybe slipping a bit of a poison or something into his food, or do something like slightly nefarious to try to knock him off his perch. And certainly remember last year, Martin had the dodgy tyre in Qatar, and he very much thought that maybe somebody doesn't want me to win this. So I think it'd be good. I think it'd be great for Martin to, as much as I like Pecco, I think it'd be great for Martin to win it, to take the number 1 away from a Ducati, because that would just be hilarious. Having one of the most dominant bikes in MotoGP history and not having the number 1 plate on it would just be funny. But yeah, I think Pecco, with all of his skill, his calmness, and the dark force of the Ducati factory team behind him, they're not dark, it's just me summarizing my inner thoughts there. I think Pecco will end up winning it. So I think that's a good way to finish this race review. So it's got very, very, very close at the front. There's only 10 points in it now between Jorge Martin and Bagnaia. So we can't finish, of course, without giving some awards out. So we're going to start with Rider of the Weekend. Adam, who was your Rider of the Weekend?
I'm going Pecco again. He was just on it. He's there to be consistent, collect the points. used up the tires, used up just the right amount of fuel. It was all calculated, and I feel like he did get a little bit lucky, but he's making the best of it right now. And I think Pecco is definitely the rider of the weekend for me.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. Jules, who's your rider of the weekend?
I'm going for Maverick Vinales, and that's
What? The magician Maverick? What, for disappearing? Like, explain,
like,
please.
what a disappearing trick, and not once but twice. No, I mean he's all of a sudden he's up there on the front row, and then on Saturday he said afterwards, like, yeah, my ride height device didn't work at the start, so I dropped back 10 places, and you'd go like, yeah, okay, I guess, like always. And then the Sunday, exact same thing happens. He's nowhere to be seen. It's like, oh man, this guy, I don't know. I mean, KTM must be scratching their head by now. Like, did we maybe sign him too early on in the season?
What have we done? Oh, I love it. Brilliant. That's perfect. Matt, who's your rider of the weekend?
Well, this is I'm finding this challenging. Because I kind of want to go with the combination of Bastianini and Marquez, because their racing was really what made the whole weekend worth watching, and you get right down to it. So if I can scoop the both of them for that reason, I will do that. But I don't know what the rules are here, so I have to leave it up to you.
It's all fair game.
Then then there you go, right there. The two of them, hammer and tongs. Absolutely. They both kind of deserve it equally.
Amazing. Allowed to have riders of the weekend. I think that's fair because I completely agree with you. My rider of the weekend, Pedro Acosta, even though he threw it away, even though I've slagged him off a bit for saying he's thrown it away, he showed us that it's so close and is there, and it's coming. So we'll move on to moment of the weekend, and I'll go first for this one so nobody can steal mine again, Danny. I'm going to go for the moment of the weekend, vortices. In the practice and qualifying, seeing vortices coming off the aerodynamics, and it just absolutely reminded me of watching a specific F1 race actually back in 1998, the Argentinian Grand Prix with Schumacher and the huge vortices coming off the rear wing. I'm such a weird geeky nerd, but it just reminded me instantly of that, and it's unusual. I think it's great to see, and it kind of reminds you of just the amazing engineering and just physics, the miracle of physics that we watch week in, week out and almost take for granted happening right in front of us. It's great to see a visual representation of aerodynamics working. So that was my moment of the weekend. Jules, what was yours?
Yeah, that's a good thing about the aerodynamics. My moment is Jorge Martin quali crash, because it showed that he's still not flawless, but it gave us something to look forward to, and a race that was enjoyable, seeing him have good starts and trying to limit the damage. And maybe without that, it would have been a duller race.
Perfect. Matt, it looked like you were just about to say something until I got to Jules.
Yeah, I said you knew I was coming for those vortices, and you closed the door. That was just rude. Absolutely
slammed
that
door.
I did not know exactly what you were thinking. That's why I got in there.
No.
So what was your moment of the weekend?
I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to annoy Adam. But I'm going to go for the lap that almost was. I will go for the lap that should have been, except for the tiniest of track limits violations, because that thing was just bonkers. And unlike certain other former world champions who crashed their vehicle and then say it would have been the best, he at least made it across the finish line and put up a time before they took it away.
Nice, can't argue with that. And that was a little nod towards the Jeddah 2021 qualifying lap there. Love it. Adam, what was your moment of the weekend?
My moment's actually Pedro Acosta, and it's not necessarily the pole position, but it was him celebrating in pit lane as he's going back to park firm. It was hilarious to watch, and it's quite the drastic difference between the current state of Formula One and MotoGP. And I just think that it was hilarious to see him with his little celebratory hand gestures at the other riders in the grid. as he was driving through pit lane. It's hilarious. And Pedro's he's a character, and I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it, Matt.
Can I put it in honorable mention? And
Absolutely.
that would be TNT showing us a Pedro Acosta tiny documentary right before he put it on pole, which I'm sure nobody else caught, but somebody went to his hometown and they interviewed people and talked to his parents and stuff like that. His mom still says he has a messy room. And then I watched qualifying and I'm like, no way. That was genius writing. Good job.
Oh, brilliant. That's absolutely excellent.
His mom said that, really?
Yeah, totally. I hope you can find it online and watch it because his mom was hilarious.
We can see where he gets the character from then, which is really good. We like to have these personalities in the sport. Talking of personalities, please follow my panel. Matt, where can people follow you?
At MattPT55 on all your socials except for Facebook, where I'm Matt Trumpets.
Nice one. Adam, where can people get you?
You can find me on Instagram at adam.grandprixtravel. And if anybody's in Austin the next couple of weeks for Formula One, I'll be around.
Good stuff. Jules, where can people get you?
You can find me on Twitter. It's just at Jules Seegers.
Excellent. And whilst you're on Twitter following all of my panel or Instagram, why don't you give the show a follow? Why don't you follow Missed Apex Moto? And while you're following that, why don't you tell us how bad or how good we are? Or even how beautiful we are. You can write to us at missedapexmoto@gmail.com. That's missedapexmoto with a capital N at gmail.com. You can also follow me at Kyle Power, F1 on Twitter. If you want to follow, I'd rather you follow the show though. I'd rather you follow everyone and follow me, but follow the show before you follow me. That'd be good. So it's Phillip Island again. It's a couple of week breaks. We get a bit of a break, a bit of a breather in what has been a frantic few races, and we'll be back to review the newly resurfaced Phillip Island for the Australian Grand Prix. As always, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP.